If there are any graduate students in the room, if anyone here is currently in grad school at FSU, your point of contact would be the Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards and their director, Dr. Adrian Stevenson. CLS, the two awards I'm talking about are for both undergrads and graduate students, with sort of like an asterisk next to the Boren Scholarship, which we'll talk about. And so both of these apply to whether you're an undergrad or grad. And so for those of you who are grads, you're eligible for these. For those of you who are undergrads and you're like, maybe this isn't the year, but when I'm working on that master's or PhD, maybe that's the ideal time for you, and just know that this exists and available to you. Here on the left-hand side, you have Office of National Fellowships, and you have me and my colleagues listed there. As I said, I'm Josh Stanek. I'm the second one. Yeah, okay, so jumping into it. So just the overview of the awards we're talking about. We're talking about the Boren Awards Program for International Study, as well as the Critical Language Scholarship, which actually lists right there the languages that they focus on. Neither of these, just as a forewarning, neither of these are geared to teach you Western European languages, with an exception for Portuguese in both programs. Actually, that's interesting. CLS has added Portuguese since this banner was created, and so I should have probably caught that, but I didn't. So there are actually, so if you're looking to do a scholarship in French or Spanish, I would encourage you to talk with our Modern Languages department. But if you're looking at exploring languages in Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, then these are the scholarships for you. And so with that, I'm going to delve into the Boren Awards, which is actually two separate scholarships. Nope, okay, I have this thing going. Good, okay. So now Boren Awards, which is actually two separate scholarships, which is the Boren Scholarship, which funds undergraduate students, and the Boren Fellowship, which funds graduate students. And so keep that in mind. Boren Scholarship, which is the one I'm going to be mostly focused on here, is for our undergrads. And if you're a grad student, you would just apply for something called the Boren Scholarship, which is very similar, but there are slight differences that you'd have to talk with Dr. Stevenson about, or just review it on the website. But make sure you're reading the right sections. So Boren is funded by the Department of Defense, and their goal is to encourage people to have long-term international experiences for language learning and cultural immersion. That's what they want. They want people to gain language and cultural experience. And they are looking for that because by participating in this program, you have to make a commitment to work for the federal government. Now, if you have no interest in working for the federal government, trying to make a case for doing this, even for just a year, you're probably not going to be a very compelling candidate. But if you are already interested in working for the federal government, whether that's in any of these top 4 preferred agencies that they list here, Department of State, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, or an intelligence agency, or even any other federal agency like NASA, education, then this could be a really fitting award for you. So essentially what they're saying is that we are willing to train our future employees. And so in order to meet this commitment for government service, you would, within 3 years of your international experience and 3 years of completing your degrees, whatever degrees you're working on, and always pause to say if you do this during as an undergrad, the 3-year countdown doesn't begin until after you complete your bachelor's. But if you go directly from your bachelor's to your master's or a PhD program, then that counter pauses again. But you have 3 years of time away from academia to get a job in the federal government and work there for 1 year. Eligibility, U.S. citizenship, must not graduate until this award is complete. There's an asterisk for graduating seniors, of which we usually have more of our recipients end up being graduating seniors than anyone else. We've had students receive this as early as their freshman year. And if you're a freshman and you're interested in applying, by all means, I'm happy to support you in that. If you are a senior, what we basically tell you to do is go ahead and apply. Typically, you find out whether or not you receive the Boren scholarship at the beginning of April. And if you're graduating in, at the end of April, in spring of, let's say, 2021, then we would reach out to the registrar's office on campus and say, hey, this student is going to walk. If we're not worried about pandemic, the student's going to shake the president's hand, but do not post their degree to the transcript until they come back from this international experience. And then they just delay it however long before they post your degree to your transcript. As I said, Boren scholarship is for undergraduates and Boren fellowship is for grad students. You have to be planning to study in an eligible region of the world, which I've already talked about is essentially not Western Europe. South America is a bit difficult because they don't fund the learning of Spanish. There's some qualifying statements that they're open to talking to you about funding you to learn Spanish or to rather than learn Spanish, to go to a Spanish-speaking country in South or Central America, but they expect that your language skills are pretty much you're like fully proficient. Same with French. Like if you want to go to a French-speaking country, there are opportunities for you to do so, but it would not be France. It would not be in Western Europe, and it would be the expectation would be that your language skills are very high. There's actually, I have a qualifying statement for that, which I'll get to in a moment. And then planning to study foreign language, yes. Here is the sentence that essentially your application needs to answer in a compelling way. Like this sentence needs to be filled in and defended in your application. I would like to spend X amount of months in blank country, immersing myself in blank language and culture because I want to address blank national security concern in my federal government position with a federal department. Boren has a preference for long-term international experiences. So they want you to, the minimum is a full semester abroad, but they have preference for people who go abroad 6 months or more. So by and large, the students who we work with that actually receive the scholarship propose study abroad for 2 semesters. And if you do propose a study abroad plan for 2 semesters, then you're looking at somewhere up to $20,000 of funding. Actually, I'm sorry, that's changed. Let me go to the Boren website because that actually changed this cycle, and I just saw that the other day. And I want to give this. I want to say it's 23,000 now that you're eligible for. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. 1 second. Apologize. Thank you for bearing with me. You are eligible for up to $25,000 for your international experience for your long, if you decide to go abroad for 2 semesters. If you go abroad for a single semester, you're eligible for $12,500. So returning to the PowerPoint. Yeah, so Boren is structured in a way that's very similar to just a traditional scholarship, in that you say, hey, Boren, I'm going to go to this location for this long to study this language, and I would like you to fund my experience because it's important to U.S. national security, and I will work for the federal government. So for the most part, it's you are creating your program, right? And you're just asking them to fund it. The one exception to that is that if you'd like, you can apply for something called Boren flagship initiatives. And so what I've listed here at the bottom, the last bullet point, is just the French language flagship initiative, the AFLI. And so in this case, you're applying to be a part of a structured program. And so the way these programs work is, if you decide to apply for a flagship, there's the French language one, there is the East Asian one, there is the Turkish flagship initiative, and there is one more, which I will just go to the website to look up rather than trying to. Oop, there they are. That's where I just saw them. Here we go. South Asian, so African flagship language initiative, Indonesian flagship language initiative, which is specifically to study Indonesian, South Asian flagship language initiative, which is to study Hindi or Urdu, and the Turkish flagship language initiative, which is to study Turkish. The big one and the original one is the French one. And as you can see, it's to study several different languages. I'm sorry, I said French, but I meant African, including the language French. So this is that qualifying statement I said I had, which is that you can learn French with Boren, and they will even encourage you to do so if you were to do so through the African Flagship Language Institute, which would take you to, I believe in the past it's been Ghana, but I might be wrong. Ghana might be actually a completely English-speaking country, or predominantly English-speaking country. But somewhere in the Côte d'Ivoire area. And so in these cases, the way these programs are structured, you would begin in the summer at a location in the United States. It just so happens that the location of the African Language Flagship Initiatives for the US portion is actually University of Florida, because as some of you may know, they have a very strong African languages department. And so you would go there, you'd study intensively for, I think, 2 months in their institute. And then you and your entire cohort would then go to a location in Africa where this language is the dominant language of the community, and you would study there for all of your fall semester. And that's the bare minimum of the program. It'd be some 8 weeks, and then your time in the country of 4 months, and then you are invited to extend that. So you can propose from either the get-go or even during your program to stay another semester, and continue with your language learning, continue with an internship, any other classes that you might be doing. We had a pre-med student do this, nursing student do this, and she was able to work with a healthcare facility while she was studying. And she was like, I'm just gonna she reached out to me and said, hey, can you get FSU to approve an extension on this program? I'm going to stay for the spring semester as well, because I'm really enjoying the language learning and this internship I had. And so we were able to approve that. But you can also do that when you initially apply. The other thing I will just say about the flagship initiatives is that your chances of receiving the scholarship are very high. So last year, in place of me giving this presentation, I actually was able to invite a representative from Boren to come to Tallahassee and present. And he explained to us that the cycle prior, so the students who were evaluated in January of 2019, because that was the January, February 2019, those who applied for a flagship initiative had a 65% chance of receiving the scholarship. That's absurd, especially when you compare it to the program as a whole, where as a whole, if you apply for Boren, you're looking at a 1 in 10 chance of receiving it. The fact that flagship initiative applicants are looking at, 1 in 2, slightly more than the better odds than that of receiving the scholarship is incredible. So if any of those initiatives that I mentioned, again, I can go to the website and just read them out to you one more time. If any of these initiatives interest you, I strongly encourage you to look into them further. So African Language Initiative to study French, Swahili, Akan Twi, Wolof, or Zulu. Indonesian Flagship Initiative in order to study Indonesian. South Asian Flagship Language Initiative to study Hindi or Urdu. And the Turkish Flagship Language Initiative to study Turkish. Okay. Returning to the PowerPoint and the other special initiatives. There is a special initiative for STEM students. As I mentioned, the minimum time you're allowed to go abroad is 4 months, which for the most part begins in the fall. Boren recognizes the value of STEM in the federal government, that people with STEM backgrounds are employed regularly within the federal government. They also recognize that it's very difficult for a lot of STEM students to make time, especially 4 months to a year, to go abroad. And so they while they still have a preference for that, they do make exceptions. And so if you are a STEM student and want to spend 2 months of a summer abroad, you are welcome to apply still for this program. In sort of a similar recognition that ROTC students have a difficult time taking time away from their ROTC work, but that ROTC people are going to be future federal employees. And so Boren also can make exceptions to the time of length of time you're abroad, as well as when you're allowed to go abroad. So really these 3 programs, the STEM initiative, the ROTC initiative, and the flagship initiatives are the only ways you can make this a summer experience. With STEM and ROTC, it can be an exclusively summer experience. With the flagship initiative, there's still an expectation that you participate in the fall international experience. Otherwise, if you're applying for the standard scholarship, which again is a scholarship in the traditional sense in that you propose a program and ask them to fund it, that is a fall spring experience, an exclusively fall experience, spring summer experience, an exclusively spring, an exclusively summer experience. Those are your options. And in that chronological order, earliest you can go abroad is fall of the year you apply, which in this case, as the next slide I believe will tell us, the national deadline is in February for the Boren Scholarship. So February of 2021 for an experience that, unless you're doing one of these initiatives, would not begin until fall of 2021, but could begin as late as spring 2021. I'm trying to make this as confusing as possible for you, so I hope I'm succeeding. So please jot down all your questions because I'm happy to clarify anything I've told you. Boren Scholarship does require that our university do an initial review of all of our applicants. They have us fill out a document called a campus evaluation form. And so what we've set up is we have faculty members who are very in tune to what Boren is about, who review our applicants' applications, interview them, and basically fill out this document based on their assessment of the application plus the interview. And so in order for that to all happen before the national deadline, we have an internal deadline. So if you're applying for Boren scholarship this year, the internal deadline is January 13th, 2021, so that all of that can happen after the deadline and before the February 3rd national deadline. Cool. Okay. So there's a lot of moving parts with Boren, and really, I think the headline for this presentation is, if any of this sounds remotely interesting, email me, let's talk, let's set up an appointment, and we can talk about its nuances as it relates to you specifically. Okay, the Critical Language Scholarship. So this is funded by the Department of State, and the term critical language is a term that they use in the Department of State to sort of set languages as a priority for their employees to know. And while there is no expectation that you work for the Department of State if you receive this scholarship, they do want to know that these language skills will be valuable to you in your future, right? And so the Department of State wants to know that Americans are learning these languages, engaged with these cultures, and are using these languages in their academics, in their careers. So that's the focus of the Critical Language Scholarship. Also, what distinguishes it from the Boren Scholarship or the Boren Fellowship is that it's a short, intensive language study, and it's structured. So where the Boren Scholarship, for the most part, unless you do one of those initiatives, is you structure it, you ask Boren to fund the experience that you tell them what you've planned for. CLS is a program. So you're applying for CLS to not only get the funding, but also to join the program that they've already built. So I would like you to fund my experience at your program, is essentially what a CLS application asks. And these are 2-month intensive language study. They, with the exception of this past summer, they occur in a country where the language that you're studying is either the dominant primary language or a major language in the culture. I'm sorry, in the community. There is, where Boren doesn't have any qualifying, like you have to have X amount of experience with the language prior to applying, with the exception of French and Spanish. Boren doesn't have anything like that. CLS does. Boren doesn't have anything like that. CLS does. CLS has requirements that you have some experience with some of these languages. And so as you can see here, there are a number of languages, which I don't need to read right at the top, that do not require you having any previous study. You have to be able to make a case for the value of this language to your future, but you don't have to have studied it prior to this experience. And then there are languages like Arabic, Korean, Portuguese, and Russian, where you have to have studied it for at least 2 semesters, or if you're like, you're informally taught, then just be able to make a convincing case that you have at least what they would consider 2 semesters worth of language skills down. And then with Chinese and Japanese, 2 years of study or 4 semesters. The idea about with CLS is that during your experience, during this intensive 2-month experience where you are learning the language, they're going to give you 2 semesters worth of study of that language. And it's both because it's an intensive program, but also because you're immersed in a culture and a community that uses that language. And so by being forced to speak this language exclusively and actually signing a contract when you arrive in country with CLS saying, I will not use English while I'm here, whether or not you break the contract or not, it's up to you. But signing that contract saying that you won't use English forces you to for your language. Your language skills are going to skyrocket in those experiences. As anyone who's been immersed in a foreign country probably has experienced already. Here's a little bit about what the application entails. So two letters of recommendation, choosing the right language for you, and then you have in total 5 writing portions, right? And so the first 3 are, I believe now they are, this cycle, I was talking to a student earlier today who opened up the application. I believe they are 300, they may still be 350 words a piece. And those are really focused on how you will handle this intensive international experience. Those questions ask you things like, this is like this form of study is difficult. What experience do you have with a difficult study, intensive study like this, and what will you do to be successful in this scenario, in this situation? Second question's, how are you going to engage with your peers in this? You're going to see them a lot, for long parts of a day. How are you going to engage with them? Can you think of any experiences that you've already had that would make you should make assure us that you're going to do well here? And then third question is, what about host community engagement? Like, what do you in your minimal, and I will emphasize that, minimal free time, like what are you going to do to engage with your host community? Fourth question has sort of evolved over the years, so I can't tell you exactly where it is as of today. But in the past, it was, what are you going to do to continue learning this language when you return to the United States, and how does this language factor into your future goals? And that was 200 words this past year. It was a 200-word essay. So you've written 350 word essays, and then 1 200-word essay. So we're talking about paragraphs here. And then your last one is a 500-word or essentially a single page essay, sort of going into more detail about some of the stuff you've talked about in essay 4, but also going into your motivation. What was your initial interest in this? What is and where do you see this really, again, factoring into your life beyond the CLS experience? CLS is due November 17th this year. And so there is no internal process. Like you can work on your application until that deadline, the national deadline, November 17th. And my goal would be to get you with a fellowship advisor to support you on that process. I'm going to back up really quickly because we didn't talk about what a Boren application entails. There are 2 essays there. They're both 800 words, essentially answering your interest in this country as it relates to national security and where that national security interest is relevant to your future career. And then an essay going into detail about community engagement, as well as like particularly for those of you who are not doing a language initiative, like what is this year going to look like? Like what study program have you found to support you in this process? And how many hours are going to be devoted to language learning, et cetera. And that one also requires 2 letters of recommendation. I imagine that the 2 you chose for CLS would be the same 2 you choose for Boren. There are plenty of students who will apply for both these in the same year. Some will apply for one, will just fit them just based on circumstances. That cycle, or if you're like, well, I can do this for 2 months in the summer. Next fall, spring are sort of important to me for X, Y, or Z reason. And maybe at Boren's not the best one for me that cycle, but I plan on applying for Boren the following cycle. There's no, a student asked me the other day if it was more common to apply for one before the other, and I'd say no, not really. And there's no reason why. I think your reasoning for choosing to apply for one over another is exclusively yours, and there's no reason you need to do them in any specific order. So it's really whatever works best for you, and I'm happy to either talk to you myself about it or get you with another fellowship advisor who can talk to you about that too. And that really takes me to what I want to talk about last, even though it says thank you and ask for your questions, is really where does my office fit in? Because I'm looking through the names of the people attending. I don't recognize a lot of names, which is awesome, which means that either you're working with one of my colleagues, or is probably more likely the case based on just how few names I recognize here. This might be your first interaction with our office. This might be the first presentation that you've come to that we've hosted. And so, yes, our job is to publicize these opportunities, but a lot of our time is actually spent in helping you prepare your applications. So if you come to our office saying, I want to do the Critical Language Scholarship or CLS, then we will just jump right into that, particularly just based on the deadline. If you come to my office and say, I am interested in fellowships, but the two that you talked about didn't fit me, then there's sort of a different conversation that occurs there. So we're going to start with that one, then we're going to, and you'll sort of see where someone who's interested in CLS sort of fits into this. So a lot of my time is spent just getting to know students. We follow something called the appreciative advising model. You're welcome to Google that if you want, where we're just focused on getting to know you, finding out your interests, finding out your passions, finding out what sort of things you're engaged with, both academically and extracurricularly, and helping to find fellowships where your personal goals and your experiences align with the fellowship foundation. So the whoever controls the money behind these opportunities. And everyone in my office has several years of experience. But we're also always open to you bringing fellowships to our attention that we are unaware of. But yeah, we basically will say, well, hey, have you ever considered these 3 fellowships? That we think these might fit you really well, and then encourage you to go look at them and then tell us your thoughts afterward. Once you've find some fellowships that fit you, then it really be a discussion of timeline, like when would be ideal times to apply. Some of them you can apply for all of your undergraduate career into your graduate's career. Some they're like you can only apply in the fall of your junior year. And so sort of helping you to see that and coming up with a plan for yourself, whether we're starting with you in your senior year or we're talking to you as a freshman. And then when it's time to start working on a fellowship, usually 2 months before the deadline, getting you involved in that. And so encouraging you to start an application, start drafting essays, talking to you about who your ideal recommenders would be. And then a lot of our time is spent on the writing portions. So, and no matter what application you're applying for, if it's like, I want to go do this STEM research project, or I want to go abroad to learn a language, the applications are essentially going to find some way to ask you this same question, which is, who are you? Who do you want to be in your future? And how does this experience get you a step closer to that goal? And that requires a lot of reflection that you're really not given much encouragement to take the time to do. You're taught to critically analyze data, you're taught to critically analyze works of art, but your classes aren't going to ask you, for the most part, to critically analyze yourself. And that's what these applications require. And so I was talking to someone about this the other day. It's a really valuable experience to sort of every once in a while. I try to do it once a year myself. Uh, Look around and assess, like, okay, what am I doing? Where am I going? How do these things connect? Are the things that I've been doing relevant to the thing I want to do or the things I want to do later? Um, and drawing those through lines for myself. Um, and so what we hope as fellowship advisors is that you walk away from these experiences, certainly with a fellowship, but at the bare minimum, we want people who have a new skill set and like know how to self-reflect, and also have, at least for the time being, found a way to articulate for themselves as well as for the people who review these applications who they are and what it is that they want to accomplish. And so, like I said, a lot of our time, usually, bare minimum 4 weeks, but more often than not, somewhere closer to 2 months, is spent with weekly meetings talking about and editing and revising essays. And so you've probably never done that before. You've probably turned in every first draft ever and gotten A's every time. And I get that. It doesn't stop. You continue to do that. But that's not going to work with these essays. And that's where fellowship advisors come into place. Our experience with this type of writing and with this writing process. So yeah, what I would say, sort of again, just to reiterate the headline for today's presentation, is if any aspect of this sounds interesting to you, whether it's the fellowships or the type of advising you get from our office, what I'd like you to walk away from is that this office exists, and you should reach out to us whenever you feel ready. I would say the sooner the better. We also have great social media, which we're posting on regularly. So if you want to follow us on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, please feel free. I would say that the Instagram and the Facebook are the best ones to follow. Our Twitter sort of just like, it just copies whatever we post in the other ones. So check us out there. After this presentation, when I can get the YouTube video posted and I send you all access to that, I'll also include links to our or at least I'll include our handles to our various social media. But yeah, I'd say if any of this sounded interesting, like just send me an email. Just reply to my email. Hey Josh, here's my availability. Can we chat? I really liked X about your presentation. And yeah, cool. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to look at the chat box to see what questions everyone has. And again, just for everyone's privacy, I'm not going to read names, but I do appreciate anyone who asks me a question. So do flagship initiatives require the same eligibility as the scholarship fellowship, i.e. must work for a government agency? Yes. So that doesn't change. Like, the government sees this as an investment, right? So we're talking about the Boren flagship initiatives. Boren awards see you as an investment that they're making. Like, we're going to pay for you to have this experience because we want your skills and interests applied to work in the federal government. Okay, so moving on to question 2. Someone asked if the longest you can go is 2 semesters. No, you could go 3 semesters. At some point, you're going to look at the $25,000 and say, that's not going to cover everything I want to do. But I would just say, like, for the most part, 2 semesters is pretty common. I should qualify again, just adding more complexity to the Boren scholarship and making it more confusing for everyone. if you do the flagship initiative, that $20,000 or $25,000 I was talking about doesn't apply until you go abroad, and so you actually get money from a separate pool for the summer in the U.S. So you get paid for the summer in the U.S. and then you get up to $12,500 for your fall semester, and you can get another $12,500 for staying abroad even longer than that. Yeah, okay. I'm just leave it at that for now, unless you have good follow-up questions. Do you have to be a citizen at the time of application? That's a really fantastic question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I am on Boren's website right now, and so let me see if I can find that quickly. If not, what I would say is reply to my email with that question, and I would be happy to look into more detail. Oh, nope, actually, here we go. U.S. citizens at the time of the national application. So by February 3rd, someone would need to be a U.S. citizen for them to be eligible for the Boren Scholarship. Also, is the scholarship available to green? We just sort of answered that question. How many years, if any, of language study must you have before applying for Boren? I'm guessing this question was probably asked before I mentioned that when I was talking about CLS. But with Boren, there is no requirement. Now, I would say, particularly if you're looking at a language that is taught commonly in many universities around the US, you're going to be more competitive if you have the language skills, if you have some baseline language skill, but it is not, Boren never makes that a requirement. And the reason why I say you're going to be more competitive is because the people, by and large, the people who you're going to be applying against, probably if you're applying to study Mandarin, and then you're probably going to be applying against a lot of students who have some amount of experience studying Mandarin already, and so you're going to be more competitive if you have that as well. Let's see. Some of the languages that that are required aren't taught at FSU, though. How do we get around that? That's a really good question. So in that case, we're referring to the critical English scholarship. So I think we sort of transitioned to CLS with this question. And this applicant, or this attendee is asking, is pointing out that some of the languages for CLS that have a requirement that you've studied it prior are not taught at FSU. And so I'm going to the CLS scholarship to see what those languages are, just surely out of curiosity. So prerequisites, here we go. So we teach Arabic, we teach Russian, we've taught Korean, and we have taught Portuguese. I believe we have a Portuguese for Spanish speakers, I think is the only thing we offer is with regard to Portuguese, but I don't think we teach any South Korean or Korean anymore. Yeah, that's tough. I would say there are ways for you to, again, they're not going to look at your transcript and say like the proof of this language skill must be on your transcript or nowhere else. You can make a case for yourself if you've studied it informally through a mixture of apps and conversation clubs. But yeah, you have to provide some evidence that you've done what you would argue is at least 2 semesters of study. Cool. So this person asks if there's a requirement for years of study for Spanish for the CLS. And to be very clear, because I don't think I said this well enough, with CLS, not only is the program structured for you, but also what languages are available. So while you would think that the Department of State would consider Spanish a critical language because of our engagement with so many Spanish speaking countries, and the fact that we define something as the Western Hemisphere, and like this is an important, the relationship between North America and South America and Central America are all very important. The Department of State also says, on the other hand, there are a fair amount of Americans who speak Spanish, and apparently they feel as though there's enough Americans who speak Spanish that they do not consider this a critical one for more people to learn. Sort of like this same attitude like of like an endangered species list. It's like there's a lot of factors that come into play, and sorry, I'm going to mute my phone. It keeps buzzing. There we go. And so I think that's how I've assessed their review of Spanish and why that's not a language or part of the CLS program. And so it really is just those 11 or 13 languages. Do a quick count really quick. Oh, I'm sorry, 15 languages. It is just those 15 languages that you can choose from. Does having more experience with a language, for example, 2 years of study versus 1 year, increase your chances of getting CLS? I would assume so. I can't back that up with evidence, but I would say, they're going to CLS, because it's so structured, is going to build classes with the expectation that like we're going to have a number of people who have 1 year of study in Russian, and we're going to have a number of people who have 2 years of study in Russian, and a number of people that will have 3 years of study in Russian. So they're going to be looking to fill, my guess is like specific quotas for each of those. So in that regard, maybe not. Well, maybe yes, because as your language skills increase and the amount of time you've studied a language increases, the fewer applicants you're going to be going up against, I suppose, to fill that quota. I think that's probably the best way to, most accurate way to presume the system works, but this is a presumption. With Boren, I would say, like absolutely, even though they don't have a language requirement, like absolutely, the more familiar you are with a language already, the better. We've had like in 2 cases, I've had native speakers of Eastern European languages make a strong case to return to that country to master that language fully. Whereas, like, they spoke in their household as children, and it's it's something that they still feel fairly proficient in, but they wanted to bring that from like advanced to fluent, or from intermediate to advanced during their Boren time. So if someone's asking for clarification on the different, when it says that there's a requirement that you've done 2 years or 1 year of language study, that's a prerequisite, which means that it would not include your time studying the language for CLS. The idea is that you would have, 4 semesters of Japanese by the time that you arrived in Japan, which means that even though the application is due November 17th, let's say you're in your 3rd semester of Japanese now, as long as you tell your reviewers, hey, I'm going to be taking Japanese in the spring as well, and so that will get me 2 years, I will be prepared to immediately arrive in Japan and continue my studies from my 4th semester on. That should be fine. For CLS, do you have to have 2 semesters of a critical language completed? Oh yeah, and so we just talked about this. So yes, as long as before you leave the United States for your CLS experience, or before your CLS experience begins, you need to have met that prerequisite, but you do not need to have met it by the deadline for the application. Oh, this is a really good question. Something I definitely did not cover. What does CLS funding look like? So as I said, CLS has a structured program, not only just for your academics, but also for your living expenses and where you're going to live, et cetera. Um, their goal is always, their first preference is always to get you with a host family. And so in some countries, like you're going to be in a host country um, with a host family. I've seen in the past where they didn't have enough host families. And so what they did is they did half, each participant in the program did half or a single month in host with a host family and a single month with in the residence halls connected to the educational institution. Um, and so half the program uh, is in host family first, and half the program is in the dormitories first, and then those people would switch. Um, but their goal is to get you in the host family. If they can't do that, then they usually put you in some sort of residence hall, again connected to the academic institution. Um, and this also, their funding also covers like meals, also covers there are trips that you go on as a cohort within within the country. And so all of that is covered. Of course, there's always going to be extra expenses, things that you want to buy, snack time that exists for you. So yeah, that's what they cover. Just see how it's funny. It look like, okay, moving on. And also, by the way, if you aren't already doing this, if you do have follow-up questions to my response, then by all means, just toss them in here too. If we have already started one of the applications and we want to meet with an advisor to help with the remainder, how should we go about doing this? I assume all the advising is over Zoom. Yes, our building is not open. We are typically in the Honor Scholars and Fellows House. So if you are familiar with campus, then it's the building on top of Chick-fil-A, right on Landis Green, but it is not currently open and won't be the rest of the semester unless things change pretty drastically. And so we do all of our meetings on Zoom. What I would say is that, again, you should expect an email from me no later than the end of the weekend. Thank you for coming, giving a link to the YouTube video of recording of this presentation, providing you with links to our social media. And you could just respond to that. But I'll just, if you are in a hurry to set up a time with me, I'm putting my email address in the chat box. So you can just toss that in an email. And if you do so, just let me know like your availability. Say, hey, I'm interested in working on this application and I'm available. Typically from these hours to these hours, Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, this is my availability, etc. I can tell you already, I'm pretty booked for next week, and so we would be looking at probably, for the most part, unless you just like fit into that perfect slot that's still open, we're going to be looking at the week of the 21st, I believe. No, that is next week. So whatever the week after that is. Moving on. What kind of jobs would this entail? I am going to need that person to remind me what I was talking about because I already forgot. I'm guessing, though. I think the only times I was referring to jobs would be the Boren scholarships federal service requirement, which is that you put in a year's work with a federal agency of your choice. They have their preferences: Department of State, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and any of the any of the intelligence agencies. But it can be any federal agency, and they'll even accept Peace Corps experience as like fulfilling the federal service requirement. But if I am misinterpreting your question, please remind me what I was talking about. Will there be more workshops on language learning programs later on in the semester? No, there won't, because we have nothing more to talk. We have nothing more to talk about. Like these are the two we work the most closely with. Now, of course, Modern Languages Department has a great scholarship whose name is failing me at the moment. I'm always happy to help students apply for that. And of course, if you bring any to my attention, always happy to work with you on those applications. But these are the two common ones that we work with every year. And so what I would say is when the time is right for you, just reach out. Yeah. What are the chances of getting CLS? It probably varies for each language. So do you know what it is for Russian? No, CLS, if I were in my office, I would have this really helpful blue little spiral notebook with like with reports from critical language scholarship saying this is how many applicants we received and this is how many scholarships we gave out. I do recall because I looked at it last time I was in the office, which happens once a week. And for Boren, it was, like I said, it was 1 in 10 chance of receiving the award. And then I mentioned that the flagship initiatives have a significantly higher chance of receiving the award just because less people apply for them. But I don't know Russian. I don't know Russian for CLS, and I don't know CLS in general. I can confidently say it's less than a 20% chance of receiving the critical language scholarship in general. I couldn't tell you what it is specifically for Russian. For CLS, when are the dates for the summer programs and typically how long? So they are 8 to 10 weeks. Almost all of them are 8 weeks. And those dates do vary. And let me see if CLS has actually released that information for this upcoming year. I doubt it, but I'm just clicking on a random one. I chose Hindi, and yeah, so they will tell you what it has been in the past. And so for 2020, their plan, let's just say their plan was June 29th, 2020 to August 21st, 2020. But you can go and you can look at previous years all the way to 2006 for some of the languages, because that's how long the program's been around. They've certainly added languages since 2006, and so some of them won't go that far back. But it's usually sometime late June, beginning of July is usually start dates, and mid to late August is usually the end date. Thank you for coming. And I understand, I see a lot of people had to leave for different reasons. Okay, cool. I'm glad to hear I answered the question about work accurately. So yeah, that's all the questions here. If I'll give anyone a moment if they want to type it another in, or you can just keep sending me thank yous. I'm also fine with that too. Yeah.